This is East Asia Tonight.
Good Friday evening. I'm Atali Edwards, and tonight's top stories from East Asia. China's top diplomat warns the Iran nuclear issue is at a critical juncture after talks with Iranian and Russian officials in Beijing, while reaffirming Tehran's peaceful intentions for its nuclear program. Spineless kowtowing and selling out all Chinese people, while China blasts Hong Kong's CK Hutchison for selling Panama Canal port assets to a consortium led by US giant BlackRock and urges a rethink of the deal. South Korea's acting leader urges the public to respect the Constitutional Court's upcoming ruling on President Yoon's impeachment, stressing zero tolerance for any violence. And South Korea's transport ministry links a battery pack to the fire that engulfed an Air Busan plane back in January. Well, the blaze forced 170 passengers and 6 crew members to evacuate. Ahead on East Asia tonight, Taiwan, following years-long local campaigning, is set to fully transition away from nuclear energy in May. But rising energy use, along with pressures to go green, have set off a debate on energy security. China and Russia are standing by Iran after the country brushed off U.S. demands for fresh nuclear talks. Beijing and Moscow are calling for dialogue to resume based on a mutual respect as they urge for an end to sanctions on Tehran. This as diplomats from the three nations met in Beijing to discuss the future of Iran's nuclear program.
我们重申，基于相互尊重的政治外交接触和对话是唯一有效可行的选项。我们强调，有关方应致力于消除造成当前局势的根源，摒弃制裁施压、武力威胁。
China's top diplomat Wang Yi, meantime, said that the comprehensive agreement on the Iranian nuclear issue, inked in 2015, is an important achievement, but warned that it is at a critical juncture. Iran's deputy foreign minister described the talks as constructive, insisting the country's nuclear program is peaceful. The meeting today follows Tehran's rejection of U.S. calls for dialogue. Washington withdrew from the 2015 nuclear deal during President Donald Trump's first term. Now back in office, he is calling for a new agreement, something Iran says won't happen unless sanctions are lifted. For more on this, we are joined now by CNA's Tan Yu-Guan in Shanghai. Yu-Guan, historically P5+1 talks, but today's talks actually excluded Western powers in that group, and it comes after the three countries held joint drills. What more do we know about the discussion?
Well, even though critical parties were not at the talks, it did not stop the foreign minister Wang Yi from putting forward 5 proposals. Number one, first of all, is the peaceful resolution through political and diplomatic means while opposing the use of force and illegal sanctions. He called on all parties to create conditions for dialogue and to avoid taking actions that might escalate the situation. Now, secondly, he called on Iran to abide by its commitment not to develop nuclear weapons, but he also called on all parties, to fully respect Iran's right to peaceful use of nuclear energy. And number 3, he called for all parties to insist on reaching a new consensus based on the framework that you talked about earlier, the earlier agreement on the Iranian nuclear issue. Wang Yi says that China hopes that all parties will meet each other halfway and resume dialogue and negotiations as soon as possible. He also called on the U.S. to show political sincerity and return to the talks as soon as possible. And number 4 of his proposal, he called on all parties to insist on promoting cooperation through dialogue and opposing the use of the UN Security Council to intervene. Wang Yi elaborates that under the current circumstances, the hasty intervention of the Security Council, the P5 that you talked about, will not help the parties build trust and bridge differences. He reiterated that the restoration of sanctions will only destroy years of diplomatic efforts and called on all parties to act with caution. Last but not least, he asked on all parties to adhere to the principle of step-by-step reciprocity and to seek consensus through consultation. Wang Yi says the greatest common ground can only be found by upholding the spirit of mutual respect, and that this common ground should accommodate the legitimate concerns of all parties and meet the expectations of the international community. Otelli?
So you got China there pushing hard for a diplomatic solution, but what's standing in the way?
Well, for one, the United States isn't at the negotiating table today. And after the Trump dispatched a letter to the Iranian leader Khamenei on March the 5th, and then spoke to TV about it, the Khamenei actually came out to say that he will not speak to a bullying country. Now, Trump said in his TV appearance that his letter told Iran that he hopes that the Khamenei will negotiate, because if the US has to use force, it will be, quote, a terrible thing. Now, we must remember it was President Trump who in 2018 first pulled the United States out of the 2015 agreement over Iran's nuclear program. Now, at that time, he called the agreement a horrible, one-sided deal that should have never, ever been made. Now, that's his quote. He withdrew the U.S. from the deal despite his own administration certifying that just the year before, Iran was complying with the agreement. Now, that 2015 deal, also called the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, was signed by Iran and the so-called P5+1. That's the permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, China, France, Russia, UK, US, plus Germany. Now, the American withdrawal at that time was met with regret and criticism from the European signatories to the plan of the action. The European Union at that time even made a law to ban European citizens from complying with UN sanctions against Iran. So it suffices to say that there is, very little trust from the Iranian side with President Trump. Otelli?
So what about Iran in terms of their nuclear know-how? Where are they at this point?
Well, at this point, what we do know is that Iran is purifying uranium up to about a 60% purity. Now, that purity is about quite a distance away from the purity required for nuclear weapons, which is about 80%. Weapons grade is 80%. Still, Iran is the only country in the world without a nuclear weapons program to enrich uranium up to that level. Now, under the original 2015 nuclear deal, Iran was allowed to enrich uranium, but only up to 3.67% purity. So that's quite a lot less, right? And it's also allowed to maintain only a stockpile of 300 kilograms. But according to the last report by the International Atomic Energy Agency, it says that Iranian stockpile is now currently standing at about 8,000 kilograms, with a tiny fraction of it at 60% purity, or tens of kilograms of it at 60% purity. Now, U.S. intelligence agencies also say that while Iran has yet to begin a nuclear weapons program, it has undertaken activities that better position the country to produce a nuclear device if it chooses to do so. Otelli?
Many thanks for that report. CNA's Tan Yuguan live from Shanghai. Now, staying on Russia's foreign politics, Moscow says that it agrees in principle with the U.S. proposal for a 30-day ceasefire in Ukraine, but with conditions. President Vladimir Putin has stressed the need for a lasting solution to the conflict, which Moscow hopes to discuss with Washington. Dasha Chernachova tells us more.
A ceasefire should be part of the lasting solution for the conflict in Ukraine, and that's the bottom line that Moscow has been introducing for months now, suggesting that a respite in the fighting would only allow Ukrainian troops to rearm, to regroup, and that is something unacceptable for Russia, at least at this stage, when Russia has the upper hand on the battlefield. So the Russians are insisting on the very idea that there shouldn't be just a ceasefire for the respite. There should be the ceasefire as part of that overall deal on Ukraine and also the guarantees of security for all of the participants. We understand the Russian president has also been insisting on the root causes of this conflict to be eliminated. So any deal on Ukraine should be a wider settlement of this conflict that will be providing security guarantees. And the Russian president has also been raising many questions regarding the nuances and the details, such as verification mechanisms, controls, as well as what to do with the 2,000 long contact line along which someone will have to control that ceasefire. So all of these issues should be discussed further in detail with the American side at this stage. But what Moscow is saying that they want peace, they want to negotiate, but they don't want any band-aid solution.
South Korea's acting president, Choi Sang-mok, has called on the public to accept and respect the Constitutional Court's decision as it prepares to deliver its ruling on the impeachment of President Yoon later this month. Well, the leader stressed zero tolerance for any acts of violence. Mr. Choi said that developments in South Korea are being watched closely by the international community and stressed that it is crucial for the country's social stability that South Korean citizens express their views in a legal manner. Authorities are taking no chances. Police say they are ready to use pepper spray and batons to deal with any outbreak of violence. They are ramping up security around the court, setting up barricades. Additionally, a ban on the use of drones around the court has been imposed until Wednesday. Nearby schools and subway stations will also be shut on the day of the ruling. The U.S. President Donald Trump has signaled he wants to re-establish relations with the North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un. Mr. Trump said he still has a good relationship with Mr. Kim and referred to Pyongyang as a nuclear power with a lot of nuclear weapons.
I had a great relationship with Kim Jong-un, North Korea. If I wasn't elected, if Hillary got in, you would have had a nuclear war with North Korea. He expected it. He expected it. And they said, oh, thousands of people. No, millions of people would have been killed. But I got in. We went to Singapore, we met. We went to Vietnam, we met. We got along really good. We had a very good relationship, and we still do.
The White House has said it's still pursuing the complete denuclearization of North Korea. Last week, Kim Jong-un's sister, Kim Yo-jong, criticized the Trump administration for stepping up provocations and said it justified North Korea increasing its nuclear deterrent. Japan's Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba is facing scrutiny for giving gifts to lawmakers. Now, he insists his actions were not illegal and has ruled out stepping down over the matter. Mr. Ishiba admitted that earlier this month he gave out gift certificates worth $675 each to 15 first-term legislators in his Liberal Democratic Party. He denied that the vouchers were related to political activities and said he paid for them out of his own pocket.
そのような趣旨でございますので、政治活動に関する寄付では全くございません。政治資金規正法の問題には当たりません。そしてまた、私の選挙区の方は一人もいらっしゃいませんので、公職選挙法の規定に抵触するものでも全くございません。
Japan's political funds control law bans individuals from providing politicians with monetary and securities donations. And this includes gift vouchers. NHK reports that the lawmaker's office returned the gift certificates. The revelation comes a day after one senior LDP member questioned Mr. Ishiba's leadership and called for his replacement. Time now for a short break, but coming up next on East Asia tonight, European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde says Trump's trade war is a wake-up call for Europe and that the fallout from it would be severe. And Taiwanese tech giant Foxconn reports a lower-than-expected net profit for the last quarter of 2024, but says 2025 will be the year of AI. Hello again. Glad you're spending your Friday evening with us on East Asia tonight. It is time now for your business news with Roland Lim. And Roland, the big news today, Hong Kong CK Hutchison's port deal with the U.S. firm BlackRock. Well, that seems like it's far from done. Is that true?
You heard right. China has criticized the sale of the Hong Kong firm's Panama Canal ports, suggesting that the deal could be yet another pain point in the ongoing U.S.-China trade war. China has strongly criticized CK Hutchison for selling its Panama Canal ports assets to U.S. asset manager BlackRock for nearly $23 billion. It's urging the Hong Kong conglomerate to reconsider the sale of its two ports along the canal, calling it, quote, spineless kowtowing and betraying and selling out all Chinese people. The scathing attack published in a Beijing-backed newspaper in Hong Kong today caused CK Hutchison shares tumbling more than 6.3%. Now, they had soared more than 20% after the sale was announced. Earlier this month, Hong Kong's largest conglomerate signed a deal to sell 43 ports, which includes two at both ends of the Panama Canal, to a consortium, which includes BlackRock. President Trump has vowed to take back the Panama Canal, a move that has caused outrage in Panama. Yesterday, the White House directed the U.S. military to draw up options to increase American troop presence in Panama in order to diminish Chinese presence in the area, a claim denied by both Panama and China. Chinese authorities are once again urging lenders to boost support for consumption. That's part of efforts to shore up growth in the face of an escalating trade war with the U.S. The country's financial regulator has vowed to relax consumer credit quotas as well as loan terms. In order to do so, financial institutions are being encouraged to provide loan renewal support to eligible borrowers. Lenders are being told to increase credit supply to consumer service industries, which include wholesale and retail, as well as education. The types of products and services provided should also be expanded. Boosting domestic demand has become the top priority for Chinese policymakers this year. Beijing is seeking to expand its economy by 5% in 2025. But a years-long property crisis has weighed on consumer sentiment and growth, with analysts expecting deflationary pressures to drag on. China's National Bureau of Statistics is due to release data on the country's economic performance on Monday, likely to show that the world's second biggest economy is able to weather headwinds amid a deepening trade war with the U.S. Industrial production is forecast to grow 5.3% for the first 2 months of the year, compared to 5.8% for the whole of 2024. Retail sales in the same period higher due to spending during the Lunar New Year festivities and fixed asset investments keeping level. Despite U.S. tariffs against Chinese imports kicking in February and the doubling this month, China exported a record $540 billion worth of goods as it seeks to expand its trade with ASEAN and the European Union. Chinese stocks ended the week higher, with investors awaiting a press conference next week for additional measures to enhance domestic consumption. Stellar gains for the likes of tech giants Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent. They are seen as top beneficiaries of the AI advancement in China. The world's largest electronics contract manufacturer, Foxconn's fourth quarter profit fell unexpectedly, surprising markets. Taiwanese company formerly known as Hon Hai Precision Industries says net profit dropped 13% on year to $1.4 billion, missing analysts' forecasts, while revenue at the same time rose 15% from a year earlier to $64.5 billion. The decline is Foxconn's first since the second quarter of 2023, when it fell 0.9%, and largely stemmed from a loss in its non-operating income segments. Foxconn is one of NVIDIA's most important server assemblers and has been riding a wave of global demand for generative AI in recent years. The earnings announcement comes as an escalating global trade war complicates prospects for the firm. Foxconn has a major manufacturing presence in China and Mexico That's two of the biggest U.S. trading partners facing increased import tariffs under President Trump's latest trade-altering policies. But the firm has issued an upbeat forecast after the earnings miss. It says solid demand from its tech clients would drive strong revenue growth in the first quarter. President Trump has escalated risks of a trade war with the European Union, threatening a 200% tariff on champagne and other alcoholic products. The president's trade spat with the EU came into full focus this week when his tariffs on steel and aluminium took effect. In retaliation, the EU threatened to impose a 50% levy on U.S. whiskey, as well as other popular U.S. products like bourbon, jeans, and Harley-Davidson motorcycles. And that led to this latest escalation, with Mr. Trump saying he will impose a 200% tariff on alcohol from EU countries unless Europe cancels its levies immediately. The president also doubled down on his broader tariff plans. He said he's not changing his mind on imposing sweeping reciprocal measures on all trading partners set to take into effect on the 2nd of April.
Look, we've been ripped off for years, and we're not going to be ripped off anymore. No, I'm not going to bend at all. Aluminum or steel or cars, we're not going to bend. We've been ripped off as a country for many, many years. In the case of Canada, we're spending $200 billion a year to subsidize Canada. The European Union is very, very nasty. They sue our companies. Apple was forced to pay $16 billion.
Meanwhile, the European Union defended their stance and called on Washington to discuss their trade concerns.
The objective is to counterbalance the increased trade value affected by the US tariffs while minimizing the impact on European businesses and consumers. But the disruption caused by tariffs is avoidable if the US administration accepts our extended hand and works with us to strike a deal. So under the President's leadership, I'm ready to negotiate and we are ready to make it happen.
East Asian markets are mildly positive after a painful trading week. The Nikkei share average recouped earlier losses to end high as investors snapped up undervalued chip-related stocks. Investors not so positive in Seoul, with the benchmark Kospi lower by 0.3%. And the Taiwan-weighted index managed to stay above water. It was earlier poised for a third straight week of losses. The European Central Bank chief has warned that a full-scale trade war with the US could deal a heavy blow to global growth and inflation. Ms. Christine Lagarde expressed her concerns over US President Trump's latest tariffs and counter-tariffs, which have led to high levels of uncertainty. The ECB president also said that a full-scale global trade war would hurt the US in particular and could re-energize Europe's push towards unity, adding that Brussels had, quote, no choice but to retaliate against Washington. The European Parliament is in the throes of yet another graft scandal after police in Belgium arrested several individuals accused of alleged bribery involving Chinese tech giant Huawei. Investigators say that more than a dozen parliamentarians are on their radar, but clarified that none of the arrested so far were lawmakers. Now, Huawei is accused of allegedly bribing EU lawmakers for its benefit, an allegation that the company denies. The company says it has, quote, zero tolerance policy towards corruption or other wrongdoing. Several EU countries have imposed restrictions on the Chinese company, citing security concerns, which has also been caught in a tech rivalry between the US and China, with the US warning that the firm's equipment could be used to spy for China, placing sanctions against the company, which cut it off from the global supply chain, hampering its production capabilities. And that is the latest in business at this hour. Otelli, back to you.
Thanks so very much for that, Roland. Well, we're going to go for another break now, but coming up on East Asia tonight, Taiwan will soon phase out its nuclear energy, with plans to replace that with a mix of renewables and fossil fuels. How will that pan out? We speak with our correspondent next. This is East Asia Tonight, and here are the headlines we're following. Senior diplomats from Iran, Russia, and China convene in Beijing for talks on nuclear issues, just days after Tehran rejected Washington's calls to resume dialogue over Iran's nuclear program. South Korea's acting president, Chae Sang-mok, says there will be zero tolerance for any violence as the country remains on edge ahead of a constitutional court ruling on President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment later this month. And South Korean officials say the fire on board a parked Air Busan plane in January was likely caused by failed installation on a mobile charger. Investigators say they don't yet know why the insulation around the battery eroded in the first place. Taiwan is on the verge of a major energy transition as it prepares to phase out nuclear power in May this year. Well, the move has sparked a debate about the island's long-term energy security. CNA's Victoria Jen takes a look at the history and current state of Taiwan's nuclear energy policy.
Taiwan built its first nuclear power plant in 1978 in the wake of the global oil crisis. Due to the lack of domestic energy resources and a heavy reliance on imports, nuclear energy was at the time regarded as a reliable and cost-effective solution. 3 nuclear power plants were built and became operational between 1978 and 1985. At one point, nuclear power accounted for 32% of Taiwan's energy mix. But nuclear power became an increasingly controversial issue, especially after the island's democratization in the 1980s. The plan for a 4th nuclear power plant was set in motion in 1980. However, its construction coincided with the Chernobyl accident in 1986 and the 2011 Fukushima nuclear accident in Japan. The strong opposition from local residents and the Democratic Progressive Party led to the suspension of the project in 2014. Although a referendum in 2018 showed a majority of voters supported nuclear power as a form of supplementary green energy, another vote that took place in 2021 concluded that the number 4 nuclear power plant would not be revived. The phasing out of nuclear power in Taiwan began in 2016 when Tsai Ing-wen took office as president, marking the start of the DPP's historic 3-term streak in power. Now, under William Lai's watch, the DPP will oversee the decommissioning of Taiwan's last nuclear power plant on May 17th, thus realizing its nuclear-free homeland vision after a 4-decade struggle.
For more on this, we are joined now by Taiwan correspondent Victoria Jen, who is based in Taipei. Vic, so we know that Taiwan will be phasing out its nuclear power in May, but nuclear power currently supplies just about 5% of the island's energy needs. So why does it matter?
Well, 5% may not sound like much, but nuclear power has played a key role as a stable and low-carbon source of energy, especially during peak demand or emergencies. It's also one of the few non-fossil fuel sources that can run 24/7, unlike solar or wind, which depend on the weather. Now, getting rid of nuclear power also means Taiwan will have to rely even more on fossil fuels in the short term. That would make it difficult for Taiwan to cut carbon emission and achieve its net zero target by 2050. Another major concern is that renewables are not scaling up fast enough to fill the gap. Taiwan's renewable energy only accounts for 10% of its total energy, falling behind its target of 20% by 2025. Now, under the circumstances, analysts say to completely replace nuclear power with renewable energy is unlikely. I spoke to an energy expert, and here's what he has to say.
我们97%的能源是要从国外进口，那么你由地下人口要搞再生能源有它的限制。8年的试验已经知道你不可行，问题那么严重，返回使用核电是唯一的出路了。核电不延役，不再发展核电厂，你无解。 除非你的电力不成长。那电力呢，因为 AI 的关系，那台湾的未来的电力的成长是比过去过去8年的成长率大概接近要增加1倍。
So while 5% may sound small, it's the kind of 5% that can make a big difference during tight energy conditions. And with nuclear gone, Taiwan's energy puzzle just got a whole lot more complicated.
Okay, so I hear what you're saying. The 5% is very important during critical periods. But what about the reaction we're getting from the public, public and private sector, though? I mean, regarding the complete phase out of nuclear power. I mean, have they wrapped their heads around it?
A recent poll reveals that more than 70% of the public now support extending the use of nuclear power, a dramatic shift from more than a decade ago, because back then, safety fears after the 2011 Fukushima disaster in Japan fueled strong anti-nuclear sentiment. But today, growing concerns over power shortages, rising energy prices, and climate change are clearly changing minds. Many Taiwanese are now questioning whether phasing out a stable, low-carbon energy source is the right move, especially when renewables like solar and wind still make up a small portion of the island's energy mix. I spoke to some people on the street, and here's what they have to say.
感觉是世界的趋势吧。我觉得好像现在欧洲那边有一些国家也都是继续要用核能的。我觉得感觉。不用也没办法，对。
我应该会赞成沿用核能，因为毕竟目前可以替代的能源还太少了。那核能它其实是虽然有污染的环境问题，但是它的能源的发电是稳定的。我觉得这是一个过桥的一个机制吧。目前还没有办法说完全用干净能源来做取代。
台湾岛太小了，那如果核电厂有什么样的问题的话，变成是说可能整个台湾都会影响到。所以说，觉得说在这么密集的地方盖这么多的核电厂是比较不好的。
Now, in the business world, the mood is even more urgent. Taiwan's energy-hungry industries, especially in semiconductors and manufacturing, are sounding the alarm. Leaders like Tong Zhenxian, founder of Pegatron, have openly supported nuclear power. He said nuclear energy is very important to Taiwan. Its power generation is relatively stable, and it's economical, and it helps with energy resilience. Now, while the government remains committed to a nuclear-free future, the rising public support for nuclear energy, and the mounting pressure from business could force a rethinking of Taiwan's energy strategy.
And Vic, I mean, when we talk about Taiwan, we have to talk about TSMC, and obviously there are concerns about operation disruptions because of power shortages. I mean, that obviously could be disastrous to the global supply chain. Help us understand this. Is there a real risk of TSMC not having enough power to sustain its growth?
Well, right now, TSMC accounts for about 8% of Taiwan's total electricity consumption, which is a massive share considering Taiwan's total energy usage. The S&P predicts that the ratio could reach nearly a quarter by 2030 if the company's chip shipment doubles. Now, this makes the company's power supply a critical issue, especially as Taiwan phases out nuclear power and struggles to ramp up renewable energy sources. Now, to secure its energy future, TSMC has taken several proactive steps, and the company has invested heavily in self-generated power. It has built its own backup power systems to ensure its fabs continue operating even in the event of power disruptions. It also purchases large amounts of renewable energies. Now, despite these efforts, Taiwan's energy grid still faces challenges. The island remains heavily dependent on fossil fuels, and the pace of renewable energy development hasn't kept up with demand. Now, this has led to concerns that power shortages could still disrupt operations, not just for TSMC, but for Taiwan's economy and global technology supply chains. Now, for TSMC, securing a steady energy supply isn't just a local issue, it's a global issue with far-reaching consequences for the tech world.
And Vic, in terms of Taiwan's long-term energy security, with nuclear power out of the way, how is it looking in the future?
Well, despite having to miss its 2025 target for renewable energy at 20%, Taiwan is now aiming to achieve 30% of green energy by 2030. But many remain skeptical because they point out that one of the biggest challenges is scaling up the renewable energies. Unlike nuclear and fossil fuels, solar and wind are dependent on the weather, and that's not all. Let's now have a listen to what the analyst has to say.
那一个主要的原因呢，就是台湾地狭人稠啊，那每平方公里呢大概640个人啊，那这个是平，但是台湾有2/3是山地啊，在平地更拥挤啊，算一算呢，大概平地来讲，每平方公里大概接近2000人啊，是非常拥挤的啊。那所以在这种情况之下，你比个例子，太阳光电我们要大量的装设的话，现在是主力了啊，那。它就需要土地啊，那需要土地的话，就会跟农业的用地、渔业的用地就会冲突了，那就会造成一些环保团体的抗议跟民间的抗议啊，那这个是一个大问题。
Taiwan's dependency on imported fossil fuels like coal and natural gas is also a major risk. If global energy prices rise or if there are disruptions to supply chains, Taiwan's energy security could be compromised. Taiwan has set an ambitious target to reach net zero emission by 2050. But achieving that without nuclear energy means Taiwan will need a diverse and reliable mix of green technology, energy efficiency improvement, and smarter grid management. Now, without these steps, Taiwan's long-term energy security may be in limbo, making the transition away from nuclear power a delicate and critical balancing act.
Hey, many thanks for that report and all the interviews you've done as well. CNA's Victoria Jen in Taipei. South Korea's transport ministry says a spare power bank likely caused a fire on board an Air Busan plane in January. Officials said in a statement the blaze might have started because the insulation inside the battery had broken down. Scorch marks were found on the debris of a power bank near where the fire was first detected. But investigators don't know is how the insulation might have broken down. Officials say no abnormalities have been identified in the plane's own electrical systems. The fire was first detected in a luggage bin above row 30 on the left side of the plane. The flight was due to depart Busan bound for Hong Kong. All 170 passengers and 6 crew members were evacuated from the Airbus, but the plane itself was written off. Coming up on East Asia tonight, robots that can do household chores and more with their learning powered by advanced artificial intelligence. Now, most robots are often created with specific users in mind. But what if they have the ability to learn to do new things with the help of artificial intelligence? The day when robots can help handle household chores may not be that far off if one Chinese company has its way.
In a warehouse on the outskirts of Shanghai, this humanoid robot is learning how to steam clothes. A couple of desks over, another robot is mastering the art of sandwich making. Their repetitive movements are not just for show. They're part of a data-driven effort by Chinese robotics firm Agibot to advance AI-powered automation. The company has nearly 100 robots working in simulated environments where they practice real-world tasks with human controllers. The president of Agibot's Embodied Intelligence Business Unit, Yao Maoqing, says the hope is the bots will one day be able to help in countries with aging populations like in China or Japan.
Elderly care is a very, very large market, and there's less people, well-trained people can do those jobs. So people definitely expect the robots in 5 or 10 years can do those works to for example, organize the room for the senior people.
It starts with a data acquisition robot called the Agibot Genie 1. Each action feeds data into Agibot's central embodied AI system, refining its large-scale learning models. Yao says the simulated environments provide the bot with clear and specific tasks.
You can exactly tell the robots to do repetitive but maybe boring jobs, right? And replace people, or we should say free people from those very boring or hazardous jobs.
Yao says the company is aiming to hit a level of generative AI capability that will first allow the bots to understand instructions.
And second, can imagine and plan combinations of different skills and objects. And then at that time, I think we could have a chance to invite the robots in our home.
Agibot has released 5 robots in total, delivering about 700 to customers, primarily within China.
Stranded NASA astronauts Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore could soon be getting a ride back to Earth. Well, NASA and SpaceX say they plan to proceed with the launch of the Crew 10 mission to bring them home later today. Well, that's after technical issues with the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket, which forced a delay. The rocket will be sending 4 astronauts to the International Space Station and then serve as the craft to bring Williams and Wilmore back. The duo traveled to the ISS on an 8-day mission in June, but their stay was extended for 9 months because of problems with their Boeing Starliner, which was deemed unsafe to use as their return flight. If all goes to plan, Williams and Wilmore could depart the space station on Wednesday, 19th of March. Large parts of the world have witnessed a total lunar eclipse as our planet cast a shadow on the moon's surface. Bonnie Tyler said in her hit song, A Total Eclipse of the Heart, that every now and then she gets a little lonely. Well, no loneliness here because the lunar eclipse was visible from the Americas, the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans, as well as parts of Europe and Africa. Now, this is the first total lunar eclipse since 2022. The celestial spectacle happens when the sun, Earth and the moon line up, causing our planet to cast a giant shadow across its satellite. Now, the reddish hue is due to sunlight refracting through Earth's atmosphere before reaching the moon. And no surprise that it's been dubbed the bloodworm moon. The extraterrestrial event lasted 6 hours, but the period when the moon is completely in the Earth's shadow was just over an hour. Although Bonnie Tyler also sang that Forever's gonna start tonight, not to worry if you missed the lunar eclipse. There will be another one happening in September, and this time visible over Asia, Australia, and East Africa. The LIV Golf competition returns to Singapore today. The tournament brings team competition and a fresh approach to the sport. Now, golf is shifting with faster play, new business models, and a stronger focus on fans. But can these changes secure its future? CNA's Paulson with a report.
Golf is changing. The sport built on solo competition now embraces teams, technology, and new business models. Fans want more action, more access, and more reasons to follow the game. So what's next? And can these changes make golf bigger, better, and more commercially secure?
Golf isn't just about winning trophies anymore. It's turning into a global business, a fan-driven experience, and a digital-first sport. But can team, tech, and new formats attract audience? Well, we ask people shaping golf's future.
For years, golf business model stayed the same. Players relied on prize money, personal sponsorships, and TV deals. Now the sport is following a new playbook, turning teams into businesses, just like football clubs and Formula One teams.
This is truly the Formula One of golf. And I think what separates us, what's different, is the rights. We have the team. So if you think of a traditional sports league, the Premier League or the National Basketball Association of the NBA, you have a league and you have teams and you have players. And for here, when we're talking about commercial rights, we actually control all 3 of them. So it's a closed loop cycle. So if you're a marketing partner, there are very few outlets through sports to have a truly global outreach and experience.
Teams don't just change competition, they change how fans experience the game. Instead of following individual players, fans now support teams, rivalries, and a season-long storyline.
Building the brand is really important. What we've tried to do is focus on fans outside of golf. So people that are new to the sport, new entrants to the sport, that see us more as a lifestyle brand. They like what we bring, they like our colours, they like the different personalities of the people we have in our team. So we're targeting a whole new audience and trying to draw them in to become fans of Ripper GC.
Team format, it changes everything because you were only playing for yourself. And now when you look at the leaderboard, all balls count, so all 4 count. And so it brings a different element to the game of golf. It brings a more fun element. And there's 2 competitions in one. And so, but having buddies next to you, fighting with you, trying to win the trophy, it makes it just that much more enjoyable for us.
Social media and digital content now play a bigger role than ever. It's not enough for fans just to watch tournaments. They also want to connect with teams online, follow behind-the-scenes stories, and buy into the culture of a franchise.
Golf isn't just changing on the course, it's changing how players train, how fans engage, and how technology is shaping the sport. With data-driven coaching and interactive fan engagement, innovation is pushing golf forward.
Technology now plays a bigger role than ever. Players used advanced data analytics to fine-tune their game, while fans connect with the sport through digital platforms, live content, and immersive experiences.
The main thing for us is to really focus on understanding our fans better, so that we can deliver better experiences for them across the event. So whether that's understanding where they go, how they interact with our activities around the golf course, our hospitality, how long they spend in merchandise, where they spend money on F&B. So all of that allows us to really enhance the experience, provide a better experience for our fans.
Golf is no longer just about walking fairways and chasing trophies. It's a global business, a digital-first sport, and a growing entertainment product. The question is, can teams, tech, and new formats take the game to the next level? One thing is clear, the sport is evolving, and the fans have much more power in deciding what happens next. Paulson, CNA, Singapore.
And that wraps up East Asia tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime at CNA.Asia. And look us up on Facebook and YouTube. Have a great weekend.